Hi, welcome to tutorial number 7 for CSCI 130, Introduction to Programming, here at the University of Wisconsin Parkside. In this tutorial, we're going to review chapter 6 from our textbook. We are going to work with variables, and we're going to see how we're going to make the definition or the declaration of variables in Visual Basic, how that these are related with memory, or how that we have to allocate memory when we declare them. We're going to list the basic operators that are used in Visual Basic to perform some arithmetic, and we're going to use that information to create some mathematical expressions. Finally, we're going to discuss how can we perform an action once an event such as text change is detected. So in our previous tutorial, we were executing an action, so we were programming when a user was clicking on the button. So in this case, we were still going to do that, but still want to see if the user changed the text in the text box. We also want to have an action to be executed, and we're going to program that too. Okay, so variables basically are needed to store data. So we're going to define them when we actually need to store some type of data that we want to manipulate, and the data is usually provided by the user, or can be something that is not even provided by the user, but we're going to need it to make some decisions in our program. So we're going to see that in our examples. So when we store data, we also need to indicate the system, okay, I need a space for to store some data, but the system is going to say, okay, what type of data you want to store, so I can allocate the right amount of space, which in this case are bytes. So if I'm going to allocate a number, there are different type of numbers, like integers, whole numbers, or is that a date, is that a string, which is a sequence of characters like a name, and so on. So all of that needs to be indicated. In our previous example, we were displaying data on a label, and what we just need to be clear is, okay, label 1.text, for example, is not a variable. We were putting some information there, but that information is visible to the user. And when we actually define a variable, that doesn't necessarily mean that the user is going to be able to see the content of that variable. Maybe, like I said before, it's something that we just need to make a decision in the program, and the user will never know that there is such a variable there. And again, example of possible types are integers, string, floats, and so on. Now, when we define a name for a variable, we need to be sure that the name starts with a letter, like in the examples that I'm giving there. And a common mistake will be that we start, a very common mistake is that maybe somebody wants to start the name with a number or with another special character like the $sign, or they put spaces like I had it in high there, so there shouldn't be any spaces in the name of the variable. Now, variables are also case sensitive. In my first example that I had high with a uppercase and a lowercase, so maybe when we read it, it means the same. For the computer are two different symbols, the uppercase H and the lowercase h, so it says, oh, you're talking about two different things, and the same with my other example. Now, we need to have a section to declare variables. Before we actually use the variables, we need to tell, hey, I'm going to use a variable, so I need to declare the variable, and I need to tell the name of the variable that I'm going to use and the type. And there may be cases when I have to give an initial value of that variable. I said, okay, initially I want you to store on variable x 5. That may be the case depending on the program. Now in figure 6.6, there the textbook presents some of the basic data types that are that can be used in Visual Basic, and those names are also keywords. And in one of my slides before, I said when you give a name to a variable, you shouldn't use a keyword or something that we call a reserved word. So this is the case. So for example, here figure 6.6 lists some of the variables. The ones that we're going to be using for now is integer, which is a whole number, decimal, which is a number that will include the decimal point, or a floating point number. Now, each one of these types is going to have a limit in the amount of data that we can store. So for an integer, depending on the system, is usually up to 32,000, the max number that we can store there. Why is that we got limitations on the space? Well, because we got limitations in the space that we got available in the computer. That's why we got different types. Now, if we are going to use big numbers, or we expect big numbers in integers, then we use long, and long will also have a limitation. If we exceed, then we're still going to work with numbers that are bigger than those. Then we need to do other programming tricks so we can manipulate those numbers. Now, we should be using the data type that is going to be more appropriate for whatever program we're going to be designing. So if we're going to be working with small numbers, maybe byte will be enough. So byte may be up to, so byte is going to be numbers maybe they won't exceed, let's suppose I'm not gonna be working with numbers greater than 10, so maybe using byte is a good idea. This is an example, and from here I'm gonna stop and go into Visual Basic. In this example from the textbook, figure 6.11, lines 7, 8, and 9, there is a definition of 3 variables. So those are the names of the variables, and the type of for those variables are integers. Now on line number 12 and 13 is reading from 2 text boxes, the value that the user is providing, and then on line 16 is what we call an expression, in which variable result gets the information, the value from multiplying the content, the numbers given by the user. And then on number 19 we're gonna display the value of that variable in text in that label. Okay, so now I'm going to Visual Basic. Now I have here, and then I just gonna explain a little bit about this and how we're gonna use variables. So from our previous week, we were designing a GUI, a calculator, and you remember when we press F5 is when we actually get the GUI that we're gonna be executing. So if I press any of the buttons, nothing is happening, right? So I would like that when I press number 1, well, the number 1 is displayed here, and then if I press another one, then it's gonna be now 11. If I press a 3, it's gonna be 1, 1, 3. So it's gonna be shifting those numbers. So I need to give some functionality to those buttons, and we're gonna use variables for this. So here we're gonna click on the button number 1, and when we click on that button, then I'm gonna say, well, I want my text box 1 dot text equals 1. Okay, let's see that's enough. I'm gonna press F5. I got this. So I click in on 1, and it displays the number 1, but when I press the other one, it doesn't display the 11. Then something is wrong. I need to fix it. Okay, so what we need to do, and that's how we're gonna need now a variable, is okay, we need to remember that I already pressed a 1, and then the next time that I press another one, I want that to shift it. So I'm gonna exit this code, and then what it says here, public class, I'm gonna type and define a variable. From the PowerPoint, we know that when we define a variable, we type dim. So dim is how we're gonna define a variable. Then I need to give a name to the variable. I'm gonna call this variable screen, and then AAS is gonna specify the type. So let's say that because this is gonna something that I'm gonna display on the screen, I'm gonna display a number that's gonna have decimals. So decimal can be okay, but it won't probably be big enough for my calculator, so I'm gonna say double. Okay, so my variable screen is going to uh, to maintain the value of the numbers displayed on this on my calculator screen that later I'm gonna use to manipulate. So I'm gonna this is enough to declare my variable screen, but what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna initialize the screen, and I'm gonna say initially equals 0. That means when we start with the calculator, the initial value on my screen is 0. Now I'm gonna go back to my button 1, and then I'm gonna say now, okay, whenever they press the 1, I want to change my screen, so the value on my screen, so screen equals to whatever is on the screen times 10. Why times 10? Because we're shifting the digits, so it's gonna be the position of the digits is gonna be first is the ones, then it's gonna be the tens, then it's gonna be the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, the 100,000s, and so on every time that we press, and then we're gonna add the 1 there. Okay, now again we say that variables are not visible to the user, so now a screen is the one that is going to maintain the value on the screen, but I want that to be displayed. To be able to see it, I'm going to say text box1 dot text equals screen. Okay, so now this should be enough. So again, I got a variable screen, and then initially has the value of 0, and then I do some manipulation over my screen when I press the button 1, which I'm supposed to be adding the 1, and then once I'm done with the manipulation with what I call an expression, then I want to see the value on the screen. When I press the key F5, and we're gonna see that works. So I'm pressing here 1 1 1 1, you see that works. Beautiful. Now I need to do the same for the other buttons. You see 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0, they don't work yet. So now this is how I got some help with the help of variables. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna continue on my next tutorial with adding the functionality to the other buttons. And so this tutorial is not that long. I mean, I think I already got 13 minutes. So I'm gonna see you in tutorial number 8, in which we're gonna complete the other buttons for the calculator.